Hello, welcome to the October 25th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through as expected, and then we will begin. Bear with me just for a moment. And as I shut my phone down. Hello, welcome to the October 25th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through as expected, and then we will begin. Bear with me just for a moment. Excuse me just one moment. I'm going to turn my phone volume down. I have to give Robin Hood Bryans a call. He was the guy who did the first ZZ Top records. If you saw the ZZ Top documentary, he was in that. So my name is Greg Undo. I am the host of the live stream. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the chat field or submit them via email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could indicate which level of Cubase you're running. So if it's going to be Cubase LE, Cubase AI, Artist, Elements Pro, or if you're running other Steinberg programs, which version number. So if it's 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, that information would be helpful. And which operating system you're working on. When asking questions, my ability to answer them in real time will soon be eclipsed by the number of questions, but I'll try my best throughout the live stream to catch up. So realize that there may be a 20 to 30 minute delay. We'll try to go chronologically through all of the questions. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if you could just be patient and try to refrain from asking the same question multiple times, that would be appreciated. And we should have all of the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps. So you could easily kind of refer back to that for today's live stream. And if you wanted to search for questions that have been covered in the over 250 live streams we've done, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for his help in creating that website. We also want to give a special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this out of the goodness of their hearts. And if you want to find another wonderful resource of information that's relevant to the Steinberg community, in addition to all the official resources that are available, you can check out the Cubase Nation Discord. And we want to thank Jazz Dude for his work with that. Okay, so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work as a product specialist for Yamaha Corporation of America, and my primary duties are focusing on Steinberg products, and I'm the host. I'm presenting from Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States. If you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and then we will go ahead and get started with the questions. Okay, first question. Hi there. I've been having problems with Cubase Pro 12 lately. When connected to a bad Wi-Fi, I get a message saying no valid license found. Is there a way to fix this or use Cubase offline? So Cubase doesn't require your internet connection to access, to be able to run the program. So once it's been authorized one time, at that point it's not going to call home or need an internet access for that. So if you have bad Wi-Fi, that could be a separate issue than what you're running into. The one thing you may want to, sometimes I've seen reinstalling the program can help this. And also if you perhaps reinstall the Steinberg Activation Manager, which you could download and install separately. But once again, you don't need to be online. So your internet connection, once the program is authorized, you should be fine. All right. So a question. Hello, Greg. How do I set up Cubase for a DJ set playlist, playing different BPMs in the same project? So if you have, different tempos, I just quickly imported this right before we started. So I'm not sure if you want to play it all from the same tempo, but if we have like different files, like maybe this song is a little slower than this one. So if you wanted these to kind of, be the same, and we have varying tempos, so I know a lot of DJs want to have kind of simple segues. I'm going to just select the first event here, and we will go to our project menu, and I'm going to do just a tempo detection of that. And we'll see that this will automatically create kind of a timeline. So let's say we'll just kind of listen. All right, so I want this to be starting at my downbeat right there. So now we can have our tempo. And we have our tempo detected of the particular events. And let's say if I have a second song, I could do the same process. I'll just select the audio file here. So we have one common tempo track and have the songs set into different areas. So let's do a tempo detection of this. This song is faster. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this. Let me let you know what I'm about and what it... All right, so let's say our downbeat will be kind of just right here. You may not have to be so accurate with where the downbeats are. So if you have like a little pickup note, you can just say, okay. Let me let you know what I'm about. So we've now determined kind of the tempo of each of these, and we can see that the tempos between the two songs are very different. So if I wanted to take these two files here, I'm going to go to audio and go to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. And we could do this in the project or actually embed. And what this will do is basically take the tempo changes of every single beat and actually embed that metadata into the files. So if I wanted to seamlessly go back and forth, so that when we go between these two songs, I could just now bypass the tempo settings here and say, okay, I want it to be maybe the middle, so say 144. So at this point, I could just say, and when we go to this song, we'll have the same exact tempo. Let me tell you lies about me. So if I wanted to kind of seamlessly, so we see the original tempo here, and then we'll have the tempo that we're working at right here. And then we could have kind of a steady, consistent tempo. So it's so that way you could have kind of just easy transitions. So just kind of listen to that again. If I want these all to be slightly faster, so let's say, okay, I want it to be 156. So this one is now playing faster. This song will play a little slower. So you could have every song just kind of laid out for you just like that. So let me know if that's what you wanted to accomplish with your DJ set playlist. But that way you could speed up tempos very easily and quickly. All right, so we have a question from Alex Morgan. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to select multiple audio files in Media Bay and add each one to a separate sampler track as opposed to doing it one at a time? Thank you. I want to say that it's going to be one at a time. So let's say if I come here, we can see that we have multiple files selected. But if I wanted to create sampler track, I think it's just going to do from the very first one and add one sampler track. We could add these to multiple tracks. If we say, okay, I want to select these, and we could insert these at the cursor position if we wanted to put these onto different tracks, but that's not into the sampler. If you wanted to do this, it's maybe not utilizing the sampler track, but if you have like an instance of Groove Agent, and let's say we don't have any sounds in it, and if I wanted to take multiple sounds, we could drag and drop it into Groove Agent, and where we see the 3 So here where we see the one square, when we drop it in, we'll drop all of the content into that, all of the audio files into one pad, and it could split it into different velocity layers, or we could replace. But if I wanted to take like 5 audio files and then automatically map it to 5 different drum pads, we could do this so that each sample will be on its own pad. But I think, to do it into a sampler track, it's still one at a time. But if you want to do multiple, maybe consider using Groove Agent instead. All right. So we have just a question. Is it possible to trigger the Chopper plugin via MIDI notes? Okay, so if you're not familiar with the Chopper plugin, let's say we'll just come here. I'll just put it on this file. So let's come over. So let's just... All right, so we're going to add this as an insert. So let's say as we're playing back, we could just say, okay, I wanted to do this on. All right, so, but I don't think that this will respond to MIDI notes, but one of the ones that you might be able to use, I think that if we go to dynamics, you may be able to, that there is a MIDI gate. And once we have a MIDI gate set up, what you could do is I'm just going to add a MIDI track. And then we'll set its output to our MIDI gate plugin. I think we should see it listed. Okay, so we see on this, we'll see the MIDI gate. So if you wanted to just kind of gate via MIDI, so we're going to add a MIDI track and send it out to the MIDI gate. And now when I play just a MIDI note, that, like, and I'll just open up a quick, so it's going to just open up the gate. So just you take any MIDI controller. As soon as you let go of the MIDI note, that the gate will. So you could open up the gate via just, or if you wanted to do opposite, you could just, switch different hold modes. So maybe check out the MIDI gate as opposed to the Chopper plugin, because the Chopper plugin is more kind of automated. But if you want kind of MIDI interactivity with the sound kind of going in and out, or take another track and route it to the MIDI gate, you could do that as well. All right. It's wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. We have Uno Memento from Finland, Stefan from Sweden. All right, we have questions. Says, I can't seem to draw quarter notes. Shortest ones are half notes. Okay, so let's say we have a MIDI event here, and I'll just go ahead and let's make my... All right, so I'm just going to choose my quantized value here to quarter notes. And now as I just kind of drop in notes, it'll be set to quarter notes. If my quantized value is set to half notes, now when I drop notes in, starting here, we'll see that these notes will automatically be exactly a half note long. And if I switch this to, quarter note triplets, as I drop notes in, it'll just automatically just add different triplet note values so that we could just put in. So check your quantize here and try just setting that to quarter. And then as you draw in pitches, it should automatically just draw in just like that to the, when you draw it in directly to the quantized value. So give that a try. All right, great to see Mr. O from Colombia. I believe he's from Cali. Thanks for joining us today. We have Jan from Cubase Index from Stockholm. Thanks for being here. We appreciate everything you do for the community, Jan, with Cubase Index. All right. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, we'll just find back. All right, we see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. We also see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us. And we have Val Lee checking in from Vienna. And Diamond District Studios checking in from Johannesburg, South Africa. All right, you have Jovanovic 3D checking in from Slovenia. All right, so we have Mopman from Maryland back not too far from me. It's the next state over. It's just about 2 miles across the river from me. All right, so we have a question from Diamond District Studios. Please explain offline processing for restoration plugins on clips running Cubase 12 Pro on a 2016 MacBook Pro i7. So if you see that you have like a particular area that you wanted to do offline processing, like, you know, what you could do is just select a particular range. I don't have a lot of restoration plugins, but any of the plugins that you have in this particular setup, you know, we could come over here and just access. So let's say I want to take this range and apply a frequency EQ. So I'm going to, you could automatically apply, or if you wanted to kind of tweak settings, you could preview. So if you wanted to kind of dial in the process, so now when you hit auto apply, those settings will automatically kind of be taken into account. So if we listen to this track, and I'll take off my MIDI gate plugin. So this is the selection that we did this offline processing on. So, and if we wanted to modify settings, if auto apply is enabled, that would automatically, anytime that we make a change, we could just come over and that will just take the selected area and just do all the processing. And if we wanted to undo, we could just say, let's delete that, or multiple processes, and we could delete the multiple processes kind of, or we can delete them in a non-linear fashion. So if you had 7 processes, you could delete process 3 and leave the others completely completely intact. Okay, so we have Jason Sykes checking in from South Shields, England. Great to see you on, Stefan. All right, or Jason rather. Sorry. All right, and we have Stéphane Excourier, I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly, from France. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Peter from Montreal. All right, Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. Alexander Plasko from Connecticut. Okay, so we just see from Alexander, he asks, is there a way to input 2 separate signals to a built-in spectrum analyzer to see the result of a plugin on the spectrum, including a 3rd trace of the result? All right, so say if we wanted to go to our control room here, so let's say we have, let's say we'll just put a plug-in on, so we'll get to our frequency EQ. Okay, so all right, so say we have that EQ on, and I'll open up my supervision, and let's say we'll just make this level, and we'll make this into our frequency. All right, so say as we, all right, so we could, so you want to see two separate signals. So, so we just have, so let's say if I wanted to duplicate this track, so I'll duplicate this particular track. And let's say on this one, I want frequency activated, but the other one I don't. So, I mean, you could kind of do it like that, and let me just, you know, WaveLab has some different elements of this. You know, there's a function in WaveLab where you could take like the two separate audio files, and I'll just kind of show it quickly in WaveLab. Sorry for hitting my mic. Okay, so, you know, what WaveLab has, if you go to the Analyze, is an audio file comparator. So what you could do is if we've done processing on a particular file, so let's say if we apply, let's say we have a master rig on this, and we'll just open up, let's say maybe a, so say we're going to have different processing on this. So if we rendered this, and we could create a named file. Okay, so what we could do at this point, and I'm not sure if this is kind of what you want to accomplish, but you could take the two files here and just do an audio file comparator, and this could actually like generate like a delta file between the two processes, and that could actually create a file that's the difference between the different files. So that's a great way of kind of seeing exactly you know, what the actual processing is doing. So let me know if that's helpful, Alexander. All right, so you see from Mr. O, has anyone used a Cubase forum? So yeah, they're very popular. All right, so we have a question from Yuval. What is the most efficient way to draw pitch bend on an audio part, like drawing dB? So probably if we wanted to do this for a particular audio event, is just to, let's say if I wanted to change the pitch of, we'll have this file here, is, let me just take that. So if I wanted to do this, I go to my audio to processes, and then we could just see I want to do pitch shift. And then there is an envelope mode. So you can say, okay, I want to take that selection. We could set your range of semitones. So say, okay, I want to do 7 semitones. And at this point, we could choose to do time correction or not. But we could say, okay, at this point, I want it to go up by a couple of semitones. At that point in the file, I want to return to the original pitch. And I want to come here. And so if we listen to this file now, we'll just hear. So we could just kind of draw it in graphically, and then if you wanted to actually, get to the point where, you wanted to do that. Some people will also choose to drop it into a sampler track. So let's say if I wanted to go to sampler control, I could just take this file, drag it in, and now I could just, as I play, I could just do pitch bend data. And if I wanted to actually keep that into my audio warp, we could do this, but we could set the range of semitones for the pitch bend. So I say, okay, let's make it an octave. So while we play, I could just... So our original pitch, and let's go down an octave. So if we just record that, so let's say while we're here, I'm just going to record onto the sampler track. And I'll just go ahead solo. And if we wanted to at that point do like really detailed pitch bend editing, we could now just come over here and we could have this automatically snap to, we could set the range of the pitch bend. So let's say, okay, I want this up and down an octave, and I'll just make this really large so we could see just the pitch bend. So we'll remove this lane, and now we could just see, we'll show our semitones grid. So we say, okay, I want this to pitch bend right here and go down, by a certain semitone amount that we could just edit. So we say, okay, I want it to go up to just kind of draw in different pitch bend. We could just do that as well. So let me know if that's helpful. I've completely destroyed that song. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Patrick. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. On Ableton, we sample pads with sampler, but in Cubase 12 Pro, is it possible to sample ambient pad with sampler? We have Pad Shop, but I don't do granular kind of thing. So let's just come back to different project. So if you wanted to do pads, pretty easy. Let me just turn that off. Okay, so let's say I have, I'll come here. I'll just switch this sound from a Rhodes. Okay, so let's say I'll just have something like this. So we'll just solo this pad. So I just recorded that pad sound. So if I wanted that, so is it possible to sample ambient pad with sampler? So, you know, if I just kind of play just that pad sound in, and then if I have the sampler control, the sample track window open, I could just drag and drop. And now when I play it back, we could choose kind of our start time here. So you could just kind of just and be able to just take any sound that you want without even rendering it as an audio file and just drop it right in. So if it's a pad, so let me know if that's kind of what you wanted to do, Patrick. All right, wonderful to see Soren from Sweden on, and we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. All right, Tiago asks, question, is there a way to resize the frequency plugin window? I would like to make it bigger. So I think it's kind of a fixed size. So let's say if I come directly to a particular, I'll just go here to an audio track, and we'll go to our inserts. And go to EQ. So I think it's going to be kind of the same size. So I think it's pretty workable resolution. I know some EQ plugins may kind of be much bigger, but I think, you know, you might be able to hide some of the different elements. It looks like it's kind of the same size for the actual frequency range here. I'll just check to make sure. But I think that's going to be kind of a fixed size. So that way you kind of know it's going to work at different resolutions. So I know I've kind of passed that along as a feature request for people wanting to kind of zoom in more and see maybe not 30 dB, but less dB, but have it be much larger. So I'll reiterate that point again. You see from the Heartbreak Time Machine says MIDI gate, what? So yeah. All right, Patrick is just ask, is there a plugin like Bouncy Notes in Ableton in Cubase? So I don't know what Bouncy Notes does. So, you know, if it's something kind of like, you know, maybe, let's say if I have, just going by the name, if I wanted to maybe go to our MIDI echo, where I could take a MIDI note and you know, I could just hit kind of one pitch here. So say I'll just hit one note, and we could do different pitch offset amounts. So let's say, okay, I want this to do. But if you could maybe give me an idea what the you know, what the actual bouncy notes does, might be able. We could probably replicate it, but that would be helpful just for so I understand a question better. John Costigan wants people to hit the like button, and he says it helps. So yeah, it certainly helps. So great point, John. And if you haven't subscribed to the Cubase YouTube channel, do that, and you can be notified of future live streams. But hitting the like button allows us to continue to do these. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to have your talkback being monitored in the project? I'm working on a streaming setup, so I have the following question. Can I put an extra output in a project with ASIO or ASIO for all, Cubase 12 Pro, Windows 11? So if you wanted to, let's say we have a talkback mic that's enabled. One of the things that you can do is if we add, let's say, an audio track here, we can set its input to the talkback mic that's configured directly. So we could just come here and have your talkback mic that is enabled. So if you needed to record everything here, we could just have a track with the talkback mic as the input source for a particular channel. And if you wanted not to record, but just to monitor, you could do that as well. And kind of the second question with this, can I put an extra output in a project with ASIO or audio for all? So, you want to have everything, I assume that's ASIO for all, but you'd want to have just enough out. It's going to utilize, depending on your audio interface, like most USB audio interfaces, which are by far the most popular, don't allow you to run multiple interfaces correctly, because Cubase wants to be able to actually transmit audio with sample accurate. It needs to, DAWs need to transmit audio with sample accurate precision. So we don't want necessarily one audio interface that has different drivers or different buffer sizes to be out of time. So generally you could do everything in one particular audio interface. How I do my streaming setup is, you could utilize an interface like the Steinberg UR or AXR interfaces, which will utilize a loopback. So your microphone could be connected directly into an input, and you could transmit everything plus your microphone input out to a program like Zoom or OBS, stuff like that. Or what I utilize is kind of a separate, I have one audio interface for Cubase, and that's fed into a mixer. I have a Yamaha mixer with a USB output, and I use that USB output for the stream, so it doesn't have any interactivity with the actual audio from Cubase. And I find that works super well. And when doing a live stream, you have a lot to worry about. So, having to set up, this is a very pain-free system. So. Okay. See, Jason Sykes likes to mitigate. All right, my chat field just jumped, so I think I'm close to where I was. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Filter Freak is number 33 in the likes, and it's only 3 days to the Friday session. So. All right, so we see from Aluel, I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, it says about the drawing in a quarter note. So yeah, it says maybe I missed something in a quantization then. So I think that would be kind of the overall controlling factor. All right, so we see a question from Peter. Hello, Greg. In the last Club Cubase, you may have mentioned that some of your Project Logical Editor presets were available on the Cubase Discord channel. Did I hear that correctly, or were my aging ears failing me once again? So I think that they're on. So I think Jazz Dude had put them up, but let me know, and Jazz Dude could probably actually post a link, I'm sure, to where there are. So. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to send them to you. But maybe Jazz Dude could share a quick link where they are. But I believe they are on the Discord. All right, wonderful to see Luca checking in from Munich. All right, and we have Mixing Tips checking in from Macedonia. Thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so we see question from Robbie Bowling. It says, I find a control room very confusing. I play my own instruments, run only one pair of monitors, so why? Can I A-B a mix, one for mixing, one for listening? You know, there's a couple of things that you could do with the control room that may not be as obvious. So if we wanted to, I'll just revert this quickly. You know, so even if you just have one pair of speakers, so a lot of people think, oh, if I only have one pair of speakers, what could I use the control room for? So let's take a look at some of the capabilities here. So let's say one is, you know, a lot of people use their master fader as their monitoring level. And, you know, so when I get this question a few times a month, it's like, yeah, when I exported my mix from Cubase, the sound was really low. And it's because they used their master fader as the volume control. So, and we could see that when we look at the meters of the master fader, when we do that, that we may not be getting the full bandwidth, the full levels out of our mix. But now I could adjust the monitoring volume without affecting the gain structure of what's going on directly in the project here. Now there's also some like really handy downmix presets, because obviously a lot of people are listening to mixes on phones. So if you wanted to just do a mono downmix, see how everything's going to fold down to mono. And if you know that you have like particular, you know, if you wanted to dim, and we can set kind of the dim level down as well. So we could just say, okay. So we can say, okay, someone calls you, the phone rings, or you wanted to have a known reference point. So like, this is the loudest that I monitor at. I could just click control or command, and now I know that if I go beyond this level that I may be lying to myself. And there's also something called a listen bus. So if I want to take the bass, a lot of times we could solo different tracks, but with the listen bus, we could actually have these dim the other tracks down so we could listen to it in context. So if I come here, I can make the bass louder and dim the other tracks down. So now those tracks are still there, and I could listen to it a bit more in context than just simply soloing. Now, if we have any plugins that are doing room correction, we could place these into our insert. So we may have like a plugin that's applying different EQs for our monitoring environment. And as we listen to our monitoring environment, these corrections shouldn't be applied into the exported file, because it's just kind of our processing in our monitoring environment, and we don't want our room deficiencies to be applied into our exported file. So we could have plugins that are just for the monitoring path that don't get processed when we do an export audio mix down, by having those particular plugins in the master section. So many of our programs, people have to like, oh, every time I export, I have to turn these plugins off because they're doing room correction. But the listener, you know, is not going to benefit from the room correction on the exported file. So those are some of the great things that you can do with the control room, even if you're using just a single pair of speakers. All right, so we see from Dallas LaRue. Can you explain what hysteresis is and how it's connected with recording? The word keeps coming up on videos on recording. So I'm not sure what that word is, actually. So maybe I have to watch more recording videos, apparently. Let me see if I could Google it quickly and see if maybe I'll just see if that could help. Bear with me just for a second. All right, so according to my quick Google search, this is the phenomenon in which the value of physical property lags behind changes in the effect causing it. As for instance, when magnetic induction lags behind the magnetizing force. So maybe they're kind of using it generically for latency. Like, sometimes, maybe it's the lag of like, a time you do something in a big project with lots of plugins and lots of latency, that's it. But if you have a particular video where they kind of mention the term, I could probably give you kind of more context. If you give me a little bit of context, maybe I could figure out kind of what they're doing. Sorry about my ignorance. All right, so I have a question for Mr. O. What is the MIDI tool to make a piano sound more human, i.e. not perfectly quantized, different velocities? So if you have a MIDI track, you could come over to the MIDI modifiers. And here what you could do is just have, you could randomize, and you'll have two different random stages. One is you could randomize the velocity. We can say, okay, my max value, let's say I want it to be 112, and I want it to be, between 112 and 80. So we can say, and then we could also randomize position. So, so if you wanted to say, okay, I wanted these not to be so heavily quantized, definitely kind of check out the randomize functions and the MIDI modifiers, and this will affect the playback. So that could allow you to, randomize different stuff such as pitch, length, but, for what you want to do, it sounds like position and velocity are really good choices for that. Okay. So you see Melodyne 5 looks interesting. What can you do with it? So a lot of people use it for doing pitch correction, and it does polyphonic pitch correction, but I'm not an expert in Melodyne, but maybe they have live streams that they could help you with. All right, so just see, Greg, I checked in the shortest notes I can draw are half notes, but never quarter notes, no matter the grid settings. Thanks in advance. Okay, so it's not necessarily the grid settings here. So if you're saying, if you have this set to beat, but try setting, and again, if I just wanted to create this, so it's, not necessarily the grid settings, but the quantize settings. So again, I set my quantized value to half notes. Now when I go to draw in notes, it enters them in as half notes. When I set this to quarter notes, now as we draw in, it's quarter, and let's say eighth. So just like that. So it's not necessarily the grid settings. So sometimes people will do the grid settings, but try just the quantize settings. And if you're doing it in the MIDI editor itself, try that. All right, so we see from Dom Composer, it says a question. Hello, sir. Can you show me how to fix pitch bender in Cubase 12 Elements? So, depending on what the instrument is set to, so let's say if I wanted to jump to a particular instrument here. All right, so right now if I do pitch bend on this Rhodes, I have this set within the instrument. You know, pitch bend is kind of interesting in that you want the pitch bend to match what, you know, it's often the range is set in the particular instrument, not necessarily in Cubase. So let's say if I'm here and I'm just kind of drawing, let's just go ahead and I'll play just some notes. We'll record. Okay, so we have just some notes. If I actually hit record this time, that would help. So let's say, may have just recorded it later. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so now when we want to edit pitch bend, here we select pitch bend. All right, I'll make this just a little larger so we could see it. And then we want to set the pitch bend range up and down. We want that to match the instrument. And we can show semitone grids, and we could also just snap the pitch bend. So as we wanted to just kind of draw pitch bend in, I could just take this long note here and say, okay, I want this to start with no pitch bend, and at this point go up a semitone, and then I want it up a semitone towards the end. So now we'll listen to it. So let's say at this point I want the pitch bend to return to, let's say, a static value, and then during this note I want it to go down 2 semitones and then back up. So if we have kind of one long note, we could say, okay, I want this to start up, and we could have that snap kind of all the way up, so as we listen to it. So, but you want to select pitch bend here, and then you can go to the pitch bend setup to match the range of the instrument, and then show the semitone grid. So this is the root note, 1 semitone up, 2 semitones up, 1 semitone down, 2 semitones down. So give that a try. All right, so we see from DJ Ride, hi Greg, some of the drum kits in Halion are not on B-Box in Halion 6 or just Halion. Is there a way of routing the individual hits like the kick and snare to its own separate channel? All right, so let's just go ahead and add an instrument. So I'm not sure if it's like the full Halion or not, but let's just say I'll come here to, we'll just do a Halion Sonic. So some of these may be fixed to just being so I think that these will be fixed. Let's just take a look. Yeah, these are just going to be fixed to a stereo out for all of these. So if it's just like a Halion Sonic SE, but you know, all of the sounds inside of like a groove agent, you could, you know, remap to individual outputs. So if I wanted to go here to like, you know, different drums, we could go to the mixer and route these to 32 stereo outs. Or if it's more of like a beat designer kit, we could just come over here and select different outputs for each pad. So if you want that, then I would maybe utilize maybe more, Groove Agent for that. But some of the like general MIDI kits and some of our kits are not really designed to output multiple outputs. But I think if you do it in the Halion, which it doesn't look like my Halion is in here, I'll just check it one more time. But you could add a bus inside a Halion, but for some reason it's not showing up. Let me just check my... But you could add different buses inside of Halion 6. Yeah, for some reason my Halion isn't showing up. All right. Sorry about that. All right, so we have a question from Benny from Sweden. Can you show how you do when you choose which take you want when you have, say, 5 lanes of takes? I've tried but failed to mark different parts of different takes. Cubase 12 Pro. All right, so let's say if we come... Let's say we have different takes on a particular project. I'll just revert. Okay, like here on this. So if we have different takes on projects, we could open up lanes. And from this point, we could just say... grab the comping tool. Okay, and at this point you could just select, if you don't have the lanes visible, you could go to the bottom center and select different takes here. If you wanted to kind of do a, part of this take and part of that take, we could come over to and use the comp tool to select different takes, just like so. So that's how we could do it. And then all of these would kind of get, as we select them, they'll get kind of put up to the top. So we can see take 3, take 2, if we zoom in here, take 4, take 2, and then we could choose kind of the best parts of that. So let me know if that's helpful, Benny. So we see, can you tell us more about WaveLab? WaveLab is kind of a dedicated audio editor, so it's not going to have a traditional paradigm of like what a lot of DAWs have in a mixer that's trying to emulate traditional workflows of analog mixing. So it's not going to do MIDI sequencing. It's not going to do virtual instruments, but it's kind of often used for like investigational or forensic audio mastering, a lot of batch processing capabilities. So, a lot of people will take their mix from Cubase and take it into WaveLab and do mastering, and, tons of records that you hear every day are mastered in WaveLab. It's probably the most powerful mastering solution, but if there's something in particular you want to see, just let me know. See, Alexander Plasko just says he's on WaveLab 10 still. So the comparator, the audio file comparator is in WaveLab 10. So it's been in since maybe WaveLab 4, WaveLab 3, something around that time. Okay, we see Luca helping out with answering why he uses the control room for processing just a monitoring path. Thanks for your help, Luca. All right, so we just see a comment from Victor. It says media bay is so slow with files and MIDI, and you have to scan your sample folder before you use it. So really, you just scan it once, and then WaveLab will do it. So make sure. So sometimes there is a preference. So let's say if we come over to preferences and go to media bay, where you can say scan folders only when media bay is open. So if you have that checked, otherwise, Media Bay will start scanning once it's open and then stop scanning when it's closed. So if you have that preference checked, then it's going to automatically, it could take a while, but if you just let it do the particular scanning in the background, when you go to your Media Bay, so let's say if I just wanted to pop here, say we go to our Media Bay, and say, okay, I just want to look at my game sound effects. You don't have to do scanning every single time, and you can see how kind of fast it responds. So make sure that you have a full complete scan at least, and you're not kind of having it do it only when the Media Bay is open, Victor. All right, we see Jazz Dude doing an awesome job with the moderation. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so we have Greedo Kenobi just saying hello. So thanks for joining. So Cubase Junkie just says, I use a MIDI modifier so much I forgot about the MIDI Echo plugin. So yeah, it's always a really creative tool you could use. And it's great to have Cubase Junkie on as well. And we have David M. checking in from Liverpool. All right, my chat field just jumped on me, so let's see if I get back. All right, so we see from Ben just asking, hi, Greg. I've encountered problems with playing back videos in Cubase to video players, stays black, and on the video track, it says thumbnails cannot be created. Any advice? So, check to, when we do videos in Cubase, a lot of times people will do something on their phone and there's not a consistent frame rate on a video. So a lot of times phone videos, to compress will have variable frame rates. But let's say if we just come here, and there's a myriad of codecs and containers. So I'm just going to type video support in, and there's video support in Steinberg products. So if you go to this particular we could see exactly which codec and which container type are compatible with Cubase, and realize that you could have like a MP4 file, and there could be 20,000 versions of a .mp4 file depending upon the container and the codec that's being used. So you could probably just use a utility, something like a Handbrake, I think, is a popular utility to convert to one of these known codec and container types. So video files aren't like a WAV file that is standard and will play back in anything that plays back a WAV file. So. Okay, so we see about drawing in quarter notes. Says Greg, I found a problem. I had Quantize link hidden by mistake and was set to eighth notes. So thanks a lot anyway. So I'm glad you got it sorted. All right. All right, wonderful to see Nick on the live stream. All right, so you just see from Arturo Oriamuno just says type of arpeggios. Let me see if I saw like. Oh, I may. All right, let me see. I may have skipped over a little section. Let me just see. All right, so make sure I did skip a section of questions here. And we just see from Victor, it's like drag and drop from Windows. So you could definitely drag and drop from different parts of the program. So if you wanted to, just drag and drop audio files or track presets, anything. So if you wanted to, any effects, you could just kind of drag and drop onto tracks as well. If you have from your Explorer. So let's say if I just wanted to come from Finder or Explorer, you can just come and say, okay, I want to get them to this WAV file. We could just kind of drag and drop different elements in. So let's say drag this to an audio file. So, so you could drag and drop very easily in Cubase as well. All right, and then I see Victor just says, but drag and drop is so boring because we need to preview every time the samples. You can use, if you can use ASIO, you can't play it out of Cubase. So, if you want to play back the audio from a browser and into Cubase, you could just come over here, select the audio system, and then just choose release driver when application is in background. And that's all you have to do. All right. All right. So just see a question from Patrick. What's the use of snap grid on and off? If I move a kick sample anywhere within a track, it should be perfectly aligned to the grid. How to do that? So, all right. So let's say I'll just find a kick sample here. Just jump home. Okay, so let's say I just want to drag this sample. So I'm just going to put on snap All right, and I'll just drag this. So as soon as I, have snap enabled, I hit the letter J. And now at this point, as I move an event, we could just have it automatically snap to the bar, to the beat. So now we could only do it directly here on the beats, or if we wanted to use quantized value. So you say, okay, I want this to be for eighth note triplets. So now it'll only allow me to kind of place it, and it'll snap to eighth note triplets. Or if we set this I want it to snap only to half notes. So that's how you could do it. So let me know. So let me know if that's helpful, and make sure that you have J. It turns snap on and off. And then you could use the grid. You could use the grid, use quantize, or adapt to zoom, or bar and beat. So let me know if that's helpful, Patrick. All right, you see David M has used the Cubase index this week, so I'm just giving the thanks to Jan. So. All right, so we see in Ableton, if you freeze a track, you can still edit and move the MIDI clip and cut and edit the audio, but in Cubase, you can't make nothing. So really all you have to do, instead of, maybe it's just kind of more of a semantics nomenclature thing, but you could always just come here and instead of freezing, just choose to do like a render in place. And at that point, we could just say, okay, let's go to our render in place. We go to your render settings, and now, I could come over here. I could move the audio. My original is just muted, and everything is freely done. So at that point, you could just render in place and have the file, and you could disable tracks as well. So. All right, so we see Noah just checking in. And he just says, I think he had questions about controlling his MIDI tracks being routed to virtual instrument tracks and have consistent control for effects and expression and modulation and mic position. So he just says, hello, hi, Greg, and everything. Everything worked great. Thank you so much. All right, so we see Zounds by Timo. How do you hear guitar rig in Cubase? So if you're not hearing an insert effect, like while it's recording, it could be that if you go to studio setup, that you might have to uncheck direct monitoring for the particular audio interface. So come here and make sure that you don't have direct monitoring enabled for the particular audio interface, because if you have a plugin on and then you're trying to record through it, that will pass the signal directly from the input to the output, and sometimes you could hear the process after the file's been recorded, but not during recorded. So again, go to your studio setup and just make sure that you have direct monitoring disabled. All right, so we see a nice comment from Francois B. Says, hello, thank you for your videos. You're the best. So thanks for being on the live stream, and thanks for the kind words. All right, so we see from Alexander Plasko's like, hey, hello, Greg. Just wanted to clarify a question. I wanted to compare the signal on one channel via different tap points to see exactly what proclaimed model plugs due to the signal feature request. So if you want to, maybe apply it into like a stereo track. So let's say if we have let's say we have a drum loop here, like we have a stereo audio file. And let's say if you have a particular plugin, so let's come over. So let's say if you have like a particular plugin, one of the things that you could do if you wanted to compare is if you're on a stereo track and you wanted to compare like the left and right channels. So let's say we come here to the channel settings. You could go to routing, and then at this point you could choose to listen to it in the left speaker or just the right speaker. So you could do different routing options. So if you wanted to have like the effect on the left channel but not the right channel, you could do it with the editing. So you could actually, if you wanted to, just open a routing editor, you could choose to do that, or you could put two different effects on, put the two different effects and choose it to be mono processing if you wanted to do that as well. So, and then you maybe get a sense of what's going on, if the modeling is worth it. All right, so Francois B just says, hello, can you do some videos on mixing and mastering from zero? So I've done there's a number of different videos, but, obviously kind of, mixing can be very project dependent as well. But if you have any particular questions on mixing and mastering, every project's going to kind of create unique instances, and mixing one project versus another would be totally different, so it may not be as helpful as you think. Okay, just going reading through different comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you learned something new, make sure that you actually do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer, Sr. from Beulahville, North Carolina. Hope you had a good time at Sweetwater in your visit. See, John Koskins just says he remember hysteresis as being one of the quality measurements in tape recording. So, okay, and Mr. O is just saying it's common in tape machines and old analog equipment. It's latency from the equipment sending the signal back. All right. All right, so we have a question from Jeweler the Rocket. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. Can you explain the difference between listen dim, talk dim in the control room? Okay, so let's say we have, just gonna revert this. Okay, so let's say we're playing our project. I'll activate the project here. Okay, so we have listen. So when we come over here and I enable listen on a particular track, since I go to the bass track and I enable listen, this will basically dim or make the other tracks softer. How soft the other tracks go is set on the listen dim level here. So if I turn this up, and I'm in listen mode. So let's say if I turn listen dim to around 0 when I hit listen, it's not going to make a difference. But as I adjust the listen dim down, that's what attenuates. That's the amount of dB down that the other signals will go. So that's what listen is. And then when you have talkback, we could enable talkback. And again, once we do this is like for the engineer to communicate with people that are tracking with headphones. And this is how much of when talkback is enabled that the other tracks dim down so that you can communicate over the talkback mic in the recording or control room to the musicians. So if you wanted that every time you hit talkback that everything would get quiet, you could just kind of come here, or if you just want things to dim down so they can still hear it in context while you're talking, you could just enable the talk dim amount right there. All right, so we just see question from Dallas LaRue, and it says, I'm upgrading from UR22 to UR22C. What is the major differences between the two? So the UR22C is, first of all, it's going to be on a USB-C connector type. So it'll be USB 3, and you can have like super speed USB 3.1 for lower latency. It also works as backward compatible for USB 2, whereas the UR22 is just USB 2. I think it's an A connection, an A or B connection, so kind of the older style USB connections. The UR22C also comes with built-in DSP, so you're going to have a built-in reverb that you can monitor with no discernible latency, as well as guitar amps and a morphing channel strip, which combines dynamics and EQs. And the UR22C also has 32-bit integer converters, so you can record 32-bit integer, and the UR22 is just going to be a 24-bit 192K, but the UR22C is a 32-bit integer 192K. All right, so wonderful to see Spike Williams checking in from Wales. All right, so Patrick is just saying, can you show some underrated or unknown sound design techniques and tools that come with Cubase 12? So, being able to kind of take, let's just do new project here. All right, so let's say I just want to take that. So, some great things that you could do, just kind of taking it into, being able to, let's say we have, I'll just move this to beginning of the project here. All right, so if I wanted to take this and, you know, just do transpose, I could just say, okay, let's come and, you know, so we could transpose directly here on the main timeline. There's a number of great sound design type functionality that if you wanted to come directly to the direct offline processes. So let's say I wanted to take like the original file here and be able to go to your offline processes. You know, at this point, if you wanted to, you know, let's say, okay, I want to reverse it. I want to be able to, at this point, let's say, let's do some more processes. So we showed earlier, like the pitch shift. So a lot of people may want to do kind of like an envelope pitch shift. And then let's say, okay, I want this to not do time correction. So I can say, okay, let's just take this. And now we could listen to it. So we could do fun stuff like that. If we wanted to use some of the built-in instruments with Cubase as well. So if you want to take it into the sampler track, at this point, we could just say, okay, I want to take it into the sampler track. So, and here we could apply through different filters. So let's say we want kind of a classic filter. And if you wanted to set up different LFOs for volume or panning, so let's say, okay, I want my LFO. So let's say, okay, I want my pitch, or do like different glides as well. With this, we could also just say, okay, I wanted to go to Pad Shop, which is a granular synth that now I could just drag and drop the sound directly into Pad Shop and be able to kind of just play it and do all sorts of granular synthesis directly inside of Pad Shop. So let's say, okay, I want this to. So as we're kind of working directly with, you know, so all sorts of great different sound design opportunities and capabilities built in. So check some of those things out. Okay, just reading through. Okay, so we see Ben just asking, MIDI editor, I choose ramp for my type of MIDI controller event. It works only when I draw it in manually as I record CC1, for instance, with my pedal, or MIDI faders, it's recorded as step help. So make sure that when you're doing this, so let's say, let's do new project here. So let's say I have my Quantize set to half note here. Let's go to just load up a quick preset. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just record like some mod wheel data on here, and just I'll just look, see if there's anything with just try. Okay, so let's say if I want to, I'll just see if my mod wheel is currently working. I think I may have my mod wheel mapped out to something else. All right, so I'm going to go create kind of a blank part here. Okay, so I will just come over here and let me see, my controller isn't working. Let me come over here to my MIDI remote and see if I could just see if I have my little MIDI fader box. It's working. Okay, so it could be that make sure you don't have like the AQ on. So let's say if I wanted to come here, and I'm just going to, let's see if I could get my other MIDI CCs to show up here. Hang on. Okay, so let's say if I switch this to, see if we can recreate it with pitch bend here. All right, so one thing to check is see if you have like AQ on, the auto quantize, but that may kind of do the trick. So let's say if I have this set to auto quantize to whole note, sometimes so check to see if you have, you could be quantizing the inputs, but as you can see, when I just kind of do different MIDI CCs, that kind of works as expected. So, but check to see if you have auto quantize on by any chance. I'll see if I get my controller keyboard to work a little bit. All right. All right, we see Benny says, thanks, Greg. Now I got it with the lanes. And Cubase Junkie is also recommending Backbone. It's kind of an add-on drum synthesizer, and it's a wonderful sound design tool. chat just jumped on me. So we see question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to locate a bad plugin that causes problems in Cubase? So often when Cubase will restart after a crash, generally a lot of times it will be placed directly into, if we go to, when Cubase starts up, it will do a quick analysis, it does a quick kind of integrity check, and you'll see your VST plugin manager. So you could come over here and see that some of the plugins here, may not show up and may be block listed, and you could come over and just take those particular plugins out of the block list. Sometimes they'll pass that, but still kind of cause problems. And then when Cubase starts, you may get like an error message asking you if you want to start in like a safe mode. And then at the top, often you can see what plugin is causing it. But sometimes a plugin will be fine and then misbehave. But you may see it when you start up Cubase, and that the intention of why it starts in the safe mode is that you can say, oh, this plugin caused a crash. I could disable this plugin by not enabling all my VST plugins and then turning it off. But sometimes you'll just have to, some plugins will be sneaky bad, and you may just have to kind of with experience realize that, oh, when I use this plugin, it causes system instabilities. All right, so we have Daniela Tokan just saying hello. So glad you can make it today. All right, so we just see a question. Is there an auto gain staging function that when you load up an instrument, it goes to minus 18 or 12 dB automatically? So currently there isn't an automatic way. You could have it saved as a track preset. So when you add an instrument with the track preset, that it could be set to that particular level. But there, and I'm lobbying and I'm trying to get it to a point where you could set a default track preset, level for instrument tracks, or when you go to audio tracks, as some people requested. But I'll make sure to kind of reiterate that request again and to mention it again. But you could do track presets. All right, so we just see from the Tooster question, is there a way I can increase the size of the marker track cycle names font without altering other stuff? So I think it's kind of a fixed size, but let's say if I add a marker track, and I'll go ahead and just kind of draw in, we'll just add some markers. So we'll add a cycle marker here, and let's come to our settings. So I think that the font is going to be kind of a fixed size. So let's say now I want to add, let's say, cycle marker. So, but if you just hit, I think it's Control M, you could kind of see all of, the markers. So if we wanted to kind of just name, then we could hit the down key. So now when we look at this, I think it's going to be kind of the same same kind of marker, same font size. So, but maybe if you just look at it with the Control M, that you could see you could read it, the different markers more easily. All right, so we have a question from Doug O. Hi, everyone, and Greg. Is it possible to import multiple MIDI stems at once? Someone has sent me a track with separate stems. I can only see how to import them one at a time. Thanks. So generally, what people would do, is instead of having, so I'm not sure if it's MIDI stems or audio stems, but let's say if I go to a particular project, just find one that's more, okay, so let's say we'll have something with a number of MIDI tracks here. And what we could do at this point, is, most of the time when people are sending MIDI, you want to send it as a collective entity. So we would just say, I want to export a MIDI file. So, it's probably unnecessary to export each track as a MIDI file. So let's say, okay, we'll just call this Schubert. All right, and so now if you wanted to export multiple MIDI events, just have it exported. The best way to do it is to have it exported as one collective MIDI file. So when I come and import MIDI file here, we can say, do you want to create a new project? I'll say no. And let's go to the Schubert that we just created. And now all the different files will be exported, just like, will be imported together as one file. So there's really no need to export individual MIDI. If it is coming from a Cubase project, you could also just come, and if you have the Cubase project, is come here to import tracks from project, and you could choose a particular file, choose a project, and then you could import multiple MIDI tracks, all directly from here. But generally, MIDI files, there's no consequence of having MIDI files with multiple parts. It's very, very common. So if you get the chance to just ask for that, All right, so we see question, maybe an odd question, but every time I open a new audio track, Talkback is always set. Can I set it up somehow so my singing mic channel is set? All right, so let's say I do a new project. All right, so let's create empty. All right, so I just want to go to my audio connections and, make sure that I have my mono in, and let's say I'm going into input 1, and we'll call this my vocal input. We'll call it our vocal in bus. So let's add a mono audio track. So let's see if we just click plus and we say audio. So, and at this point we could just say, you could just choose kind of like your vocal input. Right there, I know it defaults to Talkback, but once you kind of add, I think it may just default to whatever the last selected. Let me just do a new project here. So let's add an audio track. So now it's set to my vocal in, and I could add that, and that's automatically routed. So it will keep until, but it'll keep the last input until a new input is selected, but make sure that you have the inputs defined in your audio connections as well. So now, again, if I do a new project, my vocal in was the last one. So let's come over here and let's add an audio track. And now we see my audio input is set to vocal in, and I could add track and just get started right away. All right, so we see a question. How do you zoom a track at the beginning of a track by the track name on the timeline? So if you want to zoom this, or just open up a project quickly. All right, so how do you zoom a track at the beginning of a track by the track name on the timeline? So, so if you're here, you know, and let's say if you're, you know, if you just want to hit G and H, so let's say you're there, or if you wanted to zoom vertically and horizontally, you could hit Shift plus G and Shift plus G, Shift plus H. And zoom, just kind of like, so that's just G and H will zoom horizontally, Shift G and Shift H, Shift G, Shift H. So let me know if that's what you're looking for, or if I'm completely misunderstanding. All right, great to see Matt Elston on. And I just see, maybe this is a further question, further clarification on the zoom. It says, so how do you zoom in a track at the beginning of a track by the track name on the timeline? And it says the name blocks the ability to zoom. So let's say if I'm here, you know, you could always just go to directly, you know, so if you go to zoom, so let me know, I fear I'm misunderstanding the question, but you know, you could always just take the cursor right here, hold the cursor down and move it vertically up and down and zoom like that, and it doesn't really seem to have a track name. You could always just kind of grab the zoom tool as well and double click to zoom in and out. So even if you're right there, you could zoom in with the zoom tool. So it doesn't seem like it's having an impact on zoom, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Okay, so I just see from Joshua Fernandez, question. All the samples are in 44.1K. Is there a way to convert all samples to 48K? So if you have I assume it's a project, so let's say this project is at 44.1 sample rate that we see here. And let's come, and I could go to my project menu to and I'll just play this so you get an idea of the tone and the key. All right, so if I want to convert to sample rate, I could just come directly to my project setup, and I'll say, let's switch this to 48K, hit OK. I'll ask us, do you want to convert the new rate? Do you want to keep the original files in the pool directory? Why not? And here, do you want to keep it at the sample positions? Choose no. And now when we play back, the files are 48K, and we'll listen to it's going to be the same pitch and key. Now, if it's when you're dragging samples in, you know, there's a preference that you could also utilize if you go to editing and then go to audio, that you could, on import audio files, that you could automatically convert it to the project settings and project folder if needed. And that way, if you have a loop at 96K and your project's at 44.1, you drag it in, it'll convert it to 44.1 as the sample is dragged in. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream, just popping in for a quick minute. Thanks for joining us. Okay. See, Cubase 12 Pro is just saying, love Cubase 12 Pro. Love the fact that you can literally import your own picture for the track. Yeah, so just if you don't know how to do it, you'll often see just this little square here. People are like, what is that square? You could double click and choose the instrument that you want to work on. So you say, oh, okay, this is going to be a string bass. So we can say, okay, let's make it look like a string bass, or you could also put in your own user picture, so you could import standard pictures and have that for the image directly there. So this way you could kind of easily see, different instrument groups, and they're all conveniently Yamaha instruments, and you could get an idea of exactly what's on that track just by looking at the picture. Okay, so you just see from David M. says a follow-up question. So can get jazz guitar to show up in Media Bay. Bought it from Steinberg Shop in Sounds and Loops. It's in the library. Emailed Steinberg and Image Sounds, but no reply. Gareth or David, if you want to send me just I'll see if I could take a look at it. But make sure that you see it. I assume that when you go to the library manager. So let's come over here and let's get to applications. And we'll go to the Steinberg library manager. I don't think I have. Yeah, I have some loop sets, but I don't think I have that one. But see if you see it listed here in the Cubase Nuendo loop sets as well. If you see it listed there, let me know. But if you want to send me an email, I could chase it up, and you could email me again at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we have a question from Greece. How can I export mono and stereo tracks that are all routed to group tracks so they keep the EQ and compression of the group, but keep the panning and name? All right, so realize that once we have... Okay, so let's say, let me just create a scenario here. Let me see if I have it still in my... Just for Gareth's appearance. So let's say I have... So let's say I have like mono, and I'll just convert some of these to stereo just for demonstration purposes. just try one more time real quick. All right, so say I have mono tracks and stereo tracks. Okay, so the question is, how can I export mono and stereo audio tracks that are routed to group tracks so to keep the EQ and compression of the group, but keep the panning and name? Okay, so let's say I have, I'll just remove these tracks. Okay, so I have stereo, and I'm going to just take all the guitars here, and let's route the guitars to a group, or let's route these to, let's see if there's an effects channel already. Okay, so let's just add a quick reverb on it. Okay, so I want to export mono and stereo audio tracks that are routed to a group track so to keep the EQ and compression of the group, but keep the panning and name. All right, so let's go ahead. So we have mono bass and a mono, two mono guitar parts, and let's say a stereo lead. Okay, so I want to take these particular tracks, and we'll do an export audio mix down. So I want to take a multi out. So we'll take our stereo mix, and we'll say our bass groove agent, bass rhythm, all right, and we'll say lead. Okay. And we want to include the groups and sends. And let's go ahead and create a new project. All right, and for this, we could choose kind of a different naming scheme. So I'll switch my naming scheme. I'll just say, we'll just choose our name. All right, and I have set my left and right locators. Let me just jump back. All right, so now we can go ahead and listen to it. So now you could, and I probably had the, let me just close this out, and probably had this channel selected, but that's really all you have to do is just come over, and we do the export audio mix down that you choose from this particular project that you choose the groups and sends, and check out the naming convention that you actually will just choose to, go to the naming. So you can say, I want the name of the project name or the name of the channel. And then you could have all of that kind of handled. And, your mono tracks, once you do that, going through the group channel, since it's being sent through the group, it's going to render those mono tracks as stereo because it is going through stereo processing so that it sounds the same. All right. Okay, so we just see a question from Jeweler the Rocket. What about the easiest way to use cues on the mixer? All right, so let's say if we wanted to just open up a different project here. Okay, so let's say, we have like a typical band track here. We have drums, bass, guitars, vocals. All right, so if we wanted to use cues for this, we could do this kind of in the larger mixer. So you could hit F3 and go to the racks and make sure that you have cues selected in the racks. And so we'll just make sure that the cue sends are turned on. So the easy way to kind of, create this, I'm going to select, I'm just going to clear my throat. I'm going to select all of the different tracks in the project. And this is another cool thing you do with the control room. You could just, I want to come over here and let's use, I want to, first of all, enable all of the cue sends. So we're going to go to all cues and let's activate the cue sends. And let's use the current mix levels. And this is basically, so we'll make sure we have our cue sends turned on. And now if we wanted to create kind of different mixes, at this point, let's say our drummer, wants to hear more of themselves in the drum headphone mix. I could select all my drum tracks. And then I'll just hold down my quick link. And again, that's Alt or Option plus Shift. And I'll say, let's send more of the drums to the drummer. And let's send more of the bass to the bass player. And let's go to our guitars. And we want to send more of the guitars directly to the guitar headphone mixes. So I think it's these tracks that we're using. So now as we wanted to listen to our different cue mixes, so say we could just have our different cue mixes set up so the drummer is going to hear more of themselves. And let's say we'll go our bass. Now the bass is hearing more when they're in their cue mix, and we could listen to the different cue mixes. So it's our guitar, and we go to our drummer's cue mix. That way everyone could have their more me headphone mix with that. So the easiest way to kind of get that set up is just kind of right click in the control room area here in the blank, and then you'll see all cues, and then you could just enable the cues, activate the cues, use the current mix levels, use the current pan settings as well. So. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Is it possible to transfer a channel from one project to another and include the group channel and attach to the transfer channel and also include the settings for both? Thanks. Okay, so let's say I want to include my drums and let's say the drum group channel. So I'm going to select these particular tracks, and then what I want to do is to export selected tracks. Okay, we could reference media files or copy the references, and I'll just call this drum and group export. Okay, and let me make sure I exported it. Okay, so let's now, when I do a new project, so we export the selected tracks and we import a track archive. So we'll say now here's our drum and group export XML. We'll come here, let's select all, and all the routing is automatically retained going into the group with all the effects and EQs. So that's all you have to do is select. So if you have effects, group channel routing, select the groups and the effects and the tracks and export the selected tracks and then import the track archive. Thanks for all the great questions. We'll see how we're doing on time. All right. Doing well. All right. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. All right, so we see from Jeweler to Rocket, when we drop a sample into a project, can change the visual of the audio so we can see it as mono or stereo. Saw it in FL. Sometimes it's useful when you have lots of stereo files. I think it, I've always found that really strange that, if you want it, I see some programs will just automatically convert a stereo file to a mono representation. So Cubase doesn't do that, and I think that makes a lot of sense because because you're going to be doing a lot of editing on a particular file. So to me it's like why would you only see half of the information that's on a particular track? Like if you have a stereo file, it could be very different depending on which. So let's see if I just come here. So, Cubase will always kind of take, stereo tracks and show them as stereo. So, but let's say if I just drag a file over, you can see that you're going to have kind of different elements, indicating the power of like the left and right channels that are different. I think it's important to see that at all times. So if you wanted to see like all stereo files or 5.1 or 7.14 files represented as mono, I think there's a lot of I wouldn't want to see that, but maybe other people do, but I think it doesn't show you what's going on in your project accurately. All right. So we see a question from Aaron. Says, Greg, is it normal for VST Connect Pro to take 3 to 4 seconds to go into record? When I hit record, it seems to reconnect or only re-solidify the connection every time, and then it starts recording thoughts. So what's happening is once you do a VST Connect recording, and if you're not familiar with what VST Connect is going to do, is, when we come over, it's basically going to allow you to connect to someone else's, someone could be recording remotely into your, into your DAW they could download a VST Connect Performer software, and then you could track them remotely. Why you have the delay is by the time you hit record to when it's actually going to record, it has to go out to the other person's systems. Then depending upon the bottlenecks that you're going to have on the particular your internet service provider going and connected onto the online, and then it goes to the musician. They hear that in time with their latency of their recording system, and then it goes back on that same path. That could take, a little bit of time. So when you hit record, it's not going to be instantaneous like we are doing with traditional recordings, because it has to compensate for all the latency. So you may hit record, there's going to be a delay, but by the time the audio goes through that entire signal path over the internet. So that's why there's a bit of delay compared to other traditional recordings that you do, because it has to take that amount of time to have everything in sync. See, Cubase Junkie says, some of the questions could be found on Google. Make sure you Google the question before you ask Greg, because sometimes you get overwhelmed with the same questions. I don't mind getting the same questions over and over again. So if you have questions, just please feel free to ask. And realize that, so I have no problems with that, because not everyone watches every live stream. If you tune in just to get your question answered, that's totally fine with me. I have no skin in the game. I'm just here to help. So. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce has made it. All right, so we have from PZ136, is pad shops / Retrolog in Cubase 12 any different to the VST instruments on the Steinberg web shop? So the functionality, they're exactly the same. The only difference it's going to be inside of the version with Cubase is the only difference between the versions in Cubase are that they are running under the licensing, the new Steinberg licensing, so you won't utilize a USB-E licenser to run them. You have to make sure you install the latest versions. Whereas the standalones, I don't think have still migrated to the new Steinberg licensing system. So recently, I think last week, the Grand 3 had migrated over. Make sure, but the sounds and presets and functionality of the instruments are identical. All right, so we see Spike Williams just says, I used Cubase 5 for a decade, relied heavily on Guitar Rig and Reason. When I moved to Cubase 12 Pro, I assumed I would need these plugins until I discovered the power of the Cubase native instruments and plugins. All right, we have Doughboy just says, just want to say thank you to all the Cubase professionals for helping me learn how to use the best DAW coming from elsewhere. So. All right, so we have CJ just saying hi from Italy. So thanks for being on the live stream today. And thanks for getting me signed up to the Cubase Italian users Facebook group. All right, we see Michael Pierce is feeling under the weather, so we hope you recover quickly. Sorry to hear that. See from Into the Vault, thanks Greg for the help last time. Had to run out early, didn't get a chance to thank you for the answer. Cheers and thanks again. Love the live Q&As. Thanks for letting us know. It's always I always wonder if it helps people, like some of the discussions we have, since I'm the only one that could really talk. So. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me just try to find my way back. All right, so I think I'm okay. All right, so you see from Harry Olive says, could it be possible that messages disappear when switching shortly to another stream? So I don't think I've seen any of your messages here on the live stream, but I do see this one. So if you have a question, please feel free to ask. Feel free to ask again. All right, so from Alex Morgan, I think we covered this earlier. Is there any way in MediaBay to select multiple files and load into separate sampler tracks? It seems at the moment one can only do one at a time. So I believe it is only one at a time. So. But I see just see Cubase Junkie. Maybe I'm wrong. Says just hold down the shift key and click on the ones you want to drag in. All right, so I'll try that quickly. I know. Yeah, I think it's still only one. I'll just try it on a new project here so there's no doubt. So we'll have one sampler track. Yeah, I think it's still only one at a time, even though it's kind of showing. Yeah, so I think it's only one at a time. Sorry about that. See, Gareth is just mentioning one way to find a problem plugin is to open a Cubase .dmp in WinBG, and the problem plugin should be listed. So maybe in a Windows debugger. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. Greg, is it possible to fold all drum instruments as one group track and fold and unfold them to add group effects? So if you want it, let's say I had a number of tracks. So let's say I'll add a number of audio tracks. So there's a macro to kind of do this. So let's say we have 8 tracks. And I want to take these and add them to a folder and a group track. So we'll go to macros, and my macro list is really large, but I think it's selected tracks to folder, to new folder, and add group channel. So let's just come here and type in drums, give it a name, and now they're in a folder. And within that folder, you will see a group channel that all these drums are routed out to, just that way. So again, select the tracks and go to edit to macro. And my macro list is large from creating them here on live streams, but you'll see selected tracks to new folder and add group tracks. So let me know if that does what you want, Patrick. All right, so you see David M. just, he had a typo in his smooth jazz guitar, so thanks for the context, but I'll take a look at it. All right, so we have a question from Benny. Question, have installed Cubase 12 on my Mac as 3 computer, but can't install Halion content. I've tried several times without success. On my PC, everything works as it should in the emails. So I'm assuming that it's going to be, sometimes when people do the download assistant, we'll just get this open really quickly. So make sure on your other computers that you actually took the time and didn't just install. A lot of times when I hear this, I see install again, like someone just installed a Cubase, but not necessarily all like the retro log content, the Groove Agent content, the Halion Sonic content, that all of these components are installed on your other machine. So if you just installed Cubase, you might have to go through and just install all of the available content as well. So and if it's going to be more like, also if it's going to be more Halion, like the sampler specific content, that's still going to be requiring the USB E licenser. So and I remember you'd sent the reference information, so but can't install how you. So I think the email you had sent was about the reference content, so that might have been related to like a trial version of Nuendo, which has additional content for reference. But I'm not sure if the email you'd sent had referenced Halion specific content or just a reference content. So we have a question. Use an Avid Artist mix in Pro Tools dock with Cubase 12 Pro. Is it possible to also use an SSL UC1 plugin control at the same time? So yeah, you can use multiple controllers simultaneously. So it's, I have 4 controllers within 5 controllers within arm's reach of me that I can have access and all be running in Cubase without any issues. So, all right, Patrick asks, my Cubase window is not showing sample rate of the track. What are the settings to enable it? So let's look at quick project. All right, so I'm going to activate the project. All right, so when we see this, we can see the sample rate directly, like the record format here. And it could be that if we go to the Windows setup, that the status line, so go to this little icon in the far right, click here and make sure that the status line is turned on. So when this is disabled, we don't see the status. And when it's enabled, we can see the project frame rate, sample rate, all that information directly there. So make sure that the status line is enabled, and then you should be able to see that information. Benny wants people to bang the like button, so that's good. Maybe we hit the like button enough, Michael Teams will be able to make the live stream and give ice cream to everyone. So Scott Maxson just says, there's instrument pictures we'll show in the mixer. I'd like to enlarge them there a little more. All right, so let's say I want to go to my kick drum, and let's say I just want to make all right, and I think that all right, so let's say if I just want to see only. Okay, so let's get to the mixer. We'll go here. Let's look at the track pictures. All right, so so depending on the height that you make, so you can make it a little bigger, and then, but it's really more. I kind of asked for like the ability to take your picture where you could zoom in to get amp settings or different, like, more detailed settings. Maybe we'll see that coming in the future. I'll pass that along again. All right, so we see from Holland Oates, any plans to update Cubase IC Pro? It's broken in iOS 16. So yeah, I just saw that mentioned online. I will see if there's, I'll reach out to the team that does it and see if there's, what the status is, if they're working on updates. But I haven't heard. All right, so we see from Harry Olive says, hey, Greg, not sure if the questions were answered today. How can I copy / not move a clip with the mouse directly to the desired position? So if you just hold down, if I move, so if I want to copy, so right now I'm moving the event, but if I just hold down Alt or Option, then I've just made a copy of the particular event. So you may have to hold down a modifier key. So just hold down the Alt or Option key. So as soon as I hit down the Alt Option key, at that point I let go, and now I've made a copy as opposed to moving. So let me know if that's helpful. So it's not entirely with the mouse, but just hold down the modifier key in your left hand or right hand, depending if you're left or right-handed. All right, so I think we see David M says, he says, found it now. It's under SG Jazz. I missed the abbreviated name. Feel daft now. So we're just happy you found it, and make sure you let the, if you had a support ticket, that make sure you let them know that you kind of got it all figured out. And as Spike Williams says, no need to feel daft. And he says, love that word. We've all done it. So we've all been there. So no worries. You're just glad you have access to your content that you got. See, John Costigan just says to David M, technology is cool, but sometimes it makes us feel like we're 9 years old. So, yeah. So we see a question. Hi, Greg. How do I stop Cubase scanning iLock protected plugins at startup when the iLock isn't connected? They don't appear in the plugin manager if I choose to skip them at startup. So if they're kind of referenced in the project, so it's not like iLock when you don't have it connected. I don't think that it will, it's still being referenced as an available tool to use in Cubase, so it's still going to be scanning for it. And there might, I don't know if Pace has any settings to, it's like stop scanning for this, but but if they're, says they don't appear in the plugin manager if I choose to skip them at startup. So it's really, how the plugin is written also. So okay, so we see from Duggo, hi Greg, is it possible to bulk export MIDI loops? I say my project has 10 MIDI tracks. Must these be individual? Can regular MIDI be extracted from a loop? Or should I also be exporting as MIDI? So there's MIDI files and MIDI loops. The difference being that a MIDI loop can be used to import into Cubase, and it will have not only, so when we do like a MIDI loop, the MIDI loop will contain what instrument. So it's only going to work with instrument tracks, and we'll load up the instrument with the MIDI loop. But MIDI files, it's no problem. I think it makes sense to export it all as, all of your MIDI events as instead of 10 MIDI tracks, just export. You don't have to export them individually. Just export it as a MIDI file, and then you could import that into any other program. And that's really the intention of MIDI files, is not to have, if you have 64 MIDI tracks, to have 64 MIDI files. Just one MIDI file would contain 64 tracks of MIDI information. All right, so you see a question from Best Green Jesus. Can you show how to take multiple tracks, events, and have them on one track with multiple lanes for comping? Sure. So let's go ahead. I'll just open up kind of I'll just create an audio track here. Okay, so let's say I want to take, I'm going to open up the lanes, and then I'm going to copy this to a lane. So I'll hold down my Alt or Option key. As soon as I do that, it's going to create another lane. Then I could just do that. So we see another lane will be added. So let me just take this. So it looks like it's, let me just. So we could just kind of take different. So it looks like it places it at the top. And then you could just kind of move it down. So now we could have kind of multiple lanes. So if I wanted to just grab my comping tool and say, okay, I want this one from that. And you could just comp away. Now, what some people also do is kind of use a part editor for this. So, so let's say if I have I'll do a new audio track. Okay, so I want to take these and let's glue them together. All right, so now when we double click, we're in a part editor. And now I think we could I'll just open this part editor in kind of a separate screen. Then you could just kind of copy multiple events as like part editors. So if you want to do kind of more large scale comping, we could just kind of have everything in one part and be able to kind of do comping directly here. But you have to you could manually drag it in. And let's see if we have, so if we come back here, and we open up our lane view. And let's say I just want to take this event. Let's see if I hold down any modifier keys, if it, yeah, so it'll, and then if you want to keep the same exact time, just hold down like your control key, and that will keep it in the same space. So give that a try. Great to have you on the live stream. All right, so we see from Hugo, says, I just upgraded to Cubase 12.04, and now it's not recognizing Backbone. It was working in 12, but as soon as I upgraded it, it was on the block list. Can I get help with this? So I would make sure that you're running the latest version of Backbone as well. So I had a couple plugins that just went on the blacklist, like block list rather, right before. But let me just... So we come over here to my drums. So, make sure that you're running the latest version of Backbone. And there was a free update, I think, to 1.5, which added some additional functionality. So, and that might also, and with the, also if you had moved it, and the new version also works under the Steinberg licensing. So if you had removed your key and you didn't upgrade to the latest version, then that might also be have an impact. All right, so we see a question from Patrick. Greg, I don't know who can answer this better than you. I know many composers use Cubase, but do they really use it for sound design, mix and master, soundtrack only with Cubase? If so, name something. So a lot of composers I know will have, and this is probably more the Hans Zimmer school, they'll have kind of like their go-to orchestral, template, and I know Hans, and talking with other composers, Pinar Toprak and Junkie XL, and talking with Ludwig Göransson's team, that they will sit there and spend a lot of time designing unique sounds, and a lot of that's using sampler track and making sure that they're starting off with fresh sounds for each project because, one director doesn't want to hear the same sound that was used in another director's project. So to kind of give a unique identity to each one, there's a lot, Paul Hasslinger also does this, there's a lot of sound design that goes on in Cubase where I'm just collecting different sounds and coming up with ideas that are special and unique to that particular project. And then they'll save all those. So if there's a sequel, and they need to reference those particular samples, they could just simply have all of those sounds available and, have it within a library folder. All right. All right. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so we see from Decent Music, his question is there a way to skip plugin initialization every time I start Cubase 11? So it'll make sure that, your plugins, the very first time you start Cubase, it will go through and scan the plugins and it measures the latency of the plugin. It does a quick integrity check of the plugin. So if you have plugins that are always kind of failing that could cause it to take longer to go through each one. Like if you go through and say, oh, this is blocklisted, let me adjust. At that point, it will, if it still is encountering problems the next time it starts, that will take longer. But on my personal studio PC, I probably have 500 different plugins, and it starts, within 5 to 10 seconds, if that, for my whole Cubase setup, and it's just running off a standard solid state drive. It's an i9 with 64 gigs of RAM. It's nothing spectacular. But it knows, and all the plugins are kind of up to date, and it doesn't rescan the plugins every single time. So, all right. So we see from Jeweler to Rocket, it was a very informative session with Greg. Thank you. So I'm glad you learned some tips and tricks, got some questions answered. So we see from Easy Dreamers as, no, did I miss most of it? So we're probably going to go until maybe another hour and 15 minutes or until we run out of questions. So we still have a good amount of time. And that was maybe about 30 minutes ago. So. All right, so we see from InDrop, hi Greg, how can I see one fader meter on a mono track instead of default 2 meters left and right like you have in your session? I hope this makes sense. Also, thanks for all of your help. I've learned a lot. So it really depends on the meter position in the mix console. So if you have, you could right click on the meters and go to, you'll see global meter settings. So if it's a mono track, you could change the you could change the meter position to input versus post fader or post panner. So try just changing the, adjusting the meter position input. So if it is post panner, then it'll show it as stereo to indicate, the balance of a mono track in left and right. And post fader, I think, would still show mono as a single meter. but definitely input would take the input source and be able to monitor just straight from there. All right, so we see from Keith Young, hello, Greg. I have a Spectral Layer 7 12 Pro. The interface says Spectral Layers 1 point question mark. The reason I ask is I'm missing the eraser tool from the tool selection, and under process I have generate amplitude. So yeah, I don't have Spectral Layers 7 installed. I just have Spectral Layers 9. But I may be able to dig it up on my old studio computer. And just to verify, if you want to send me an email, you could email me, Keith, at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce that today's soup is what he had for dinner: a crumpet with butter and emmental cheese, a heartwarmer on the mend. Thank you. So we hope you feel better. And yeah, I was thinking of you. My wife had we kind of took a day off yesterday for Diwali, and my son had it off for school, and we went out for lunch in really kind of nice country area. And my wife had a really good bowl of French onion soup, and I was thinking of you, Michael. We hope you are feeling all better very soon. Thanks for being on the live stream with us. All right, so we see from Beyond Polarity question, if I want to edit audio from Blackmagic RAW video format, how can I move it to Cubase without losing audio quality? Don't want to use anything Adobe. So, you could definitely, whatever the audio format of the project, so you could just, I haven't worked with that particular file format. But what you could do is just import audio from video file, and that should automatically extract the raw audio file from the video. So I would try that and see if that works. And that way you're not going to do any degradation or changes in the original audio file. So. All right, and we're just seeing some other people just commenting on the DaVinci, so from Blackmagic there. All right, so we see from Jeweler to Rocket, his question is, why when I use a mono input as a source, when I start recording vocals, it records other sound sources in the track while tracking? It works only when I select left stereo. It works properly. Okay. So I'm not sure what audio interface that you're using. I sometimes will have people that are running like mixers, like little mixers that don't have the capability of where everything that's going into the mixer is always going out of a USB audio output, or if there is a loopback function on your audio interface. If you could let us know what audio interface that you're using, because sometimes what it's going to do is just, take like your, the backing track and send it back through the same USB output that your voice is going into, and you might hear like different elements bleeding into it. So maybe Jeweler to Rocket, if you could let us know what audio interface that you're using, we might be able to help a little more. All right. So we just see a question. It can be really annoying when we get the library not found or unable to locate kind of error message at startup. Which in my case is Retrolog 2. If you have a suggestion on that, I would appreciate it. So make sure that, when you are looking in your Steinberg library manager, so let's see if we still have it open now. Sometimes people will download add-on sounds and not have a license for them. So, if that's the case, then, you can get messages like that. But check, when you go to Retrolog, make sure that you have all of the different, see what content that you have the licenses for here. And if you're getting, if you, did a trial version or you just downloaded different content without necessarily purchasing the license, you may be getting messages like that. But, and this is the Steinberg Library Manager. It's a utility that's installed with Cubase. So check to make sure that the messages that you're getting, and it could be for Pad Shop or Groove Agent. So when you get messages, make sure that you see it here. And if not, you may want to just remove those particular files if you don't have a license for it. All right, we see Gareth is going to be taking off. And he wants us to not forget to debug the like. So thanks for joining us, Gareth. Okay, just reading through comments. See Best Green Jesus work on tutorials. It's great. Okay, so we see, thanks, Greg. Does Cubase chord tracks work with vocals, like drag and drop vocals to the track to find the chords? So yeah, you could do that. So let's come over. I'll show you an example. So anything that has chords in it. So let's say here we're going to have some guitar. So I have an empty chord track here, so I'm just going to drag that to the chord track. And it will automatically do the analysis and find the chords and create the chord track. So you can just kind of do that, and works probably way better than it should. So give that a try. Just drag, or you could select the vocal track or an entire mix and go to your project menu and go to chord track and just say create chord events. All right, so we see Cubase X on. And it just says, hi, Greg, thanks for your streams. Amazing stuff. Hello, Club Cubase family. So thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. How can I see in the Steinberg Download Assistant what products I actually own? For example, I know I have Spectral Layers Pro 8. How do I see that? So, and this is kind of an evolving thing that's, that's kind of in progress. But if we have the Steinberg Download Assistant open, all right, so I'll just come here. So, when you, and, what Steinberg is, the instructions when you get this is, you enter your download access code directly from, so just, So say you just come here, you enter your download access code, but any product that you entered your download access code here will automatically show up. So some of the older licensing, it may have been done differently. So it's kind of transitioning. So, as you purchase a program or product, you enter your download access code, then it shows into your My Product downloads. But you could go to your e-licenser program and also just see what licenses you have on your particular e-licenser there as well. So if you see it here, then you could download it. But, as people are kind of, newer customers for the last year or two, will just come here and enter your download access code. You do that, then it shows in under My Products for the My Product downloads. All right, reading through comments. See discussion of music theory and composition. All right, so we have a question. Can I use stereo inserts like reverb and chorus on mono tracks? I apologize if this has been asked already. So, if you, so a mono track, if you do it as an insert, it will, be a mono insert. But really all you have to do is just go to your sends and just right click and add an effects channel send. And then you can say, okay, I want my stereo reverb. So you say configuration stereo. And now that track is going out to the stereo reverb. So it's, you could add it in a send or just as easily kind of right click and add it as or you can add it as an insert or just as easily just right click to add it as a send. And that could be mono, stereo, quadraphonic, 714, whatever you want. Okay, see. Great discussion of music and creativity and chords and music theory. So see, PZ136 is, my chat just jumped on me. All right, so PZ136 just says, I think Greg is a music major, so be careful and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I was, I'm a proud street taught musician. I kind of like picked up electric bass playing in bands in high school and all through college, and I also have a music degree, so I could be a classical music snob as well. And I think both. I'm so grateful that I learned both methods. So, but I know a lot of great classical musicians who can't play their instruments when they don't have any music in front of them, and I'm like, can't you talk without reading? They're like, oh. All right, still reading some discussion of music and music theory. So, and Luca sums it up. Says people without any musical knowledge made the best music. Totally true. People with the best musical knowledge made the best music. True as well. So that sums it up well. All right. See, Michael Pierce is saying, Greg, thank you. French onion soup is the best. So, yeah, I was jealous. Next time we go out, and I'll have to get some French onion soup. But, yeah, I took a day of vacation. Felt like we were skipping school, so we enjoyed it. All right, so I have Rude Skiering checking in from Lewes, UK. So hopefully I pronounced that right. Thank you for the phonetic spelling. All right, so we just see what about Mac OS Ventura compatibility? So I haven't heard anything on that. I know it's kind of imminent release if it hasn't been released yet, but sometimes they might still be going through different quality assurances. I don't anticipate it being as much of a change as going from like an Intel to native Apple Silicon processing, but I haven't tried it yet. So. But I'll see if I could get an answer on Ventura, see if there's anything that's going to be causing issues. All right, so we have a question. Greg, there are 3 soft synths with blue GUIs that came with Cubase 11. How do I get them in Cubase 12? Because they don't show up in Cubase 12 Pro download folder. Yeah, so there's like Mystic, Spectre, and Prologue, which weren't going to be. We did those in conjunction with another company, and those products weren't going to be updated for future operating systems and future processors. So they were dropped. If you're on a Windows platform and you Google, some people have copied over a particular DLL file and copied that over from the Cubase 11 folder to a Cubase 12 folder and have gotten it to work. So you could do that, but those instruments won't be compatible kind of going on in time. So that's why they weren't necessarily included in Cubase 12. So okay, so we see from Gerald Ely, hey Greg, when using the step designer and I record to track, it's off beat after 3 steps. How can I get it to record on beat? All right, so let's take a look. Let me just go to this project. Great to see Gerald from Martinez, California. Okay, let me just right. Okay, so let's say. Okay, so let's say. So just have kind of one note that's repeated. And let me go ahead and just hit record on this. And I'm going to enable record here. And let's see if it. And I'm going to take off my auto quantize. It would help. I'll put on my click track. Okay, and so that all sounds like it's staying on time. One other thing you could do, Gerald, just out of curiosity, is if you don't record it in real time, just see if you select the events and go to MIDI and then go to freeze MIDI modifiers, and then that will basically process the effect of the MIDI plugins into the events. So, and see if that is off, and make sure that, you know, maybe when you're working on the step designer that, you know, you don't have it set for, you know, 18 steps instead of 16, something like that, that could cause it to loop off. But it seems like that was working kind of as expected for me. Okay, just reading through. So lots of great discussion. So we see from Beyond Polarity, any advice for someone looking to be in a position like the one you're in? When I first started, I mean, Steinberg was a very small company. You know, in the U.S., there was just a handful of people. And I just wrote the company a letter. You know, I was 22, 23 years old. And I just said, oh, when I was looking to buy software, there wasn't anyone able to show me the software. And you should hire me to go around music shops and show software. So when people ask about it, like I did, that, you know, that people would, you know, be informed and be able to help. And they, you know, and they just gave me a shot, and I've been doing it for, you know, 30 years now. So, you know, I was lucky I kind of made up my own job, but, you know, realize that there's probably a lot of people who don't really want to work hard. So if you'll work hard for people and, you know, generate income for them, that they'll give you some money back. So, but, you know, take the initiative, and, you know, that's what I did. And, you know, and I've been able to build a career out of it. Luckily, I've been incredibly fortunate. All right, thanks for all the great questions. All right, let me just, my chat field just jumped on me. All right. All right, so you see Sable Winters watching in background. She's like number 140. Thank you very much. Okay, that's a great discussion today. Still reading through. All right, so interesting discussion of fanboys of different DAWs. Okay, still reading through all different comments. Thanks for all the great discussion again. Nick is saying 148 likes, 150 would look so much better. It's that little perception thing. All right, so I see a question from Michael Pierce. Are we Zooming on Friday? So I believe so. I had my own kind of Zoom license. I put on my corporate credit card, and then they wanted me to kind of go with the corporate account, and they still haven't gotten it sorted out since October 1st. So I'm planning on doing a Zoom. I will probably have to chase it up with my company to make sure I have a license. So if I don't have a license on Friday, then we may postpone it a week. But I'm hopefully we'll have our end of month Zoom on this October the 28th. All right, and Michael Pierce is just saying he has hair to show off. All right, that's always what I look forward to. All right, we had a couple people that had sent questions in. Let's get to those. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, so we had a question. Can you discuss the auto fade settings for use with comping tracks? Okay, so I think I have kind of a project. To show this, just find it. No, I think I put it into. All right, so often when kind of comping tracks, so let's say if and I just put a test tone here. All right, and I'll turn this down because then it's probably incredibly annoying to listen to, but for demonstration purposes. All right, so let's say we have a test tone, and I've recorded this across kind of multiple tracks in a comp. So let's say, okay, we have different test tones, and I wanted to do a comp take. So often when we do this, we can say, okay, I want to take like part of this take here, this, and we'll listen to our different comp performances. And often as we do this, we can notice that on this particular track, I'll just turn these off, that every time, like in a pure test tone, we may hear these little clicks and pops between each of the transitions. And that could be annoying. So one of the cool things that Cubase has on playback is this auto fades mode. So I could say, let's just adjust auto fades and fade in and fade out. And we could set these to be, logarithmic if we wanted to. So, we could just kind of set these. So I'll hit OK. And now when I play back, we could just, again, come over here and just say, okay, I want to do auto crossfades between events. So let's make it straight linear. And now as we want to play back the events, we could just minimize and just kind of do quick crossfades between. So without, we take it off. And what this could do is just basically add just a start, like a fade in, fade out, and we could just add these and say auto crossfade. So that you could just have short fade in and fade outs automatically without having to go through and set up crossfades between each different part. All right, so we have a question. Greg, what is the difference between muting an event and disabling an event? The end result seems to be the same, except a muted track can be edited. When is muting or disabling preferred? All right, so if we had a lot of processing going on a particular track, what we could do at this point, so let's say we had a number of heavy-duty inserts going on. So let's say we had, multi-tap delay, a couple of those going on with some big settings. And so as we do this, we could look at, just add a couple of these, a couple more of these. All right, so as we have a lot of, so when doing this, if we mute the events, we only don't hear it. So let's say if we go to F12, and now if I choose to disable the track, what disabling track will allow us to do is to not hear the track, but also it will bypass all of the processing on that particular track. So when you want to actually not process, not have these take up CPU cycles as well, that's when you could choose to disable the track, and that will mute the source as well. But if you wanted to actually, hear the, just to cut off the audio to not enable the audio, that's when you could mute. So a lot of times people may disable tracks, and then that will, if you're not hearing it, why have it take up CPU cycles? So that's kind of the thought. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Thank you for all you do for Cubase users. I have two questions. So first question, how can I deactivate seeing real-time algorithm has been deactivated because pitch or stretch factor lies outside the limits of the current preset from appearing? So I don't know if there's a way to specifically turn off that particular message. So often what's going to be causing that is if you have a particular, say if I go to this project and we have very audio active within a particular project. So when I double click here and we go to Very Audio, the algorithm for Very Audio will automatically switch to real time, and that's what it uses for the detection and the different processing. But one other thing that could have an impact on this is the default warping algorithm. Make sure that you have this here set to like a Elastic Pro time, and that may help also. So if you have like maybe one of the standard algorithms here for the default warping algorithm, that may also change it. So but there isn't a way that I know just to kind of actually turn off like those notifications. But I'll pass it along as maybe a preference. All right, another question. How do you utilize the visibility configurations, options, and key commands? So he had noticed that when we went to key commands that we have visibility. So I think if we go to channel and track visibility, that we could have visibility configuration 1 and 2. So let's say I'm in this project and let's say I only want to hear, what we could do with these visibilities is say, okay, I only want to, I'll just do it let me do it in a different project. So let's say we're here. And I'm going to revert. So let's say I only want to see drums. I only want to see guitars. I only want to see background vocals. I only want to see lead vocals. So I could come directly into my mix console here and say, okay, I only want to see my drums. So I will select these. Let's go to our channel visibility, say let's show only selected channels, and I will add a configuration and call it drums. Okay, so now I only want to see bass. So I will come over here, show all channels. So let's say bass and drum. So I will come here. All right, and I think I have a guitar solo buried here. All right, so I want this configuration. So we're going to say show only selected channels, and I want to save this as bass and guitar. Okay, so if I want to go back to drums, I just click here, and then I could use that keyboard shortcut just to look at my drum channels, just to look at my guitar and bass. Let's look at all of my vocal channels. So I can come here, and I want all my gang background vocals as well. So let's go ahead and select, show only the selected channels. And let's add a configuration and say Vox. So at this point, when I want to switch between the different track visibilities, I can just say I only want to see these particular elements, and those keyboard shortcuts that we just looked at will allow us to have the keyboard shortcut just to trigger those particular visibility configuration. And once these are set, we could choose to synchronize this view, like this mix console, and a project. So once I'm here, I can say I only want to see my bass and guitars. But when I go to my visibility configurations again, we could, come over and just say, now I only want to see drums. And when I close out my folder, I don't see anything but drum tracks here. So you could look at the visibility settings here and synchronize those directly with the visibility settings found in the mix console. And again, that's just kind of handled so directly right there. Okay. Another question. Hi, Greg. A colleague has a laptop that does not meet Cubase's minimum screen resolution. The muted tone in the key editor becomes near invisible. It doesn't seem possible to change the color of the muted tone. Is it possible instead to change the background color to a lighter in the key editor? Thanks, Greg, for the live streams. Okay, so let's jump over to a different project. So let's say we're here. We'll activate. Hang on a second, my son is at the door. All right, sorry about that. So I'm back. All right. So again, the question is it possible to, instead, to change the background of the color of the key editor lighter in the key editor? So let's take a quick look. Okay, so let's say we have our key editor here, and sometimes when we select events, it could be hard to see with just a little bit of the tiny outline. So if we want to change the background color of the editor, we can come right over to the preferences. And let's go to user interface, and we'll see track or color schemes, and then you'll see editor area background. So I can now just double click here, and let's say I just move this up, then hit OK. Then we could change the color, so you could see when it's more, we could change the settings right there. So we go to our preferences. I'll just go back to my defaults and hit apply. And okay, so again, go to your preferences, to user interface color schemes, and you'll see editor area background. Double click on that color there, and you could modify the color to be brighter. All right, let's go back to our live field here. All right, you see we're at 155 likes. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So we just see, hi Greg, is there a way to zoom vertically with your scroll wheel and a key bind together, like horizontal scroll wheel plus control? So currently there isn't. I mean, other than just kind of, I don't know what the reasoning is. So like, you know, we can just come here and control and zoom horizontally, but there isn't a way to do that with a key modifier vertically. But if you hit, you know, shift plus, you know, if we have this as our active window, shift plus G and H, you could do that, or just using the zoom tool, just kind of saying, okay, I want to just see that, and double clicking, and then you could jump back. But there isn't an equivalent, like how you do with the mouse scroll wheel for horizontal zooming. For vertical, I'll mention it again. All right, so we see from Gerald Ely says, thanks, it's a MIDI lag problem, had to lower the buffer size. All right, so that's good. Glad you got it sorted. All right, so we see from the Studio International says, hi, Greg, how do you move audio tracks from the top fixed display to the main display to put them in the fixed display by accident and can't seem to move them? Pro 12, Windows 10. So I'm not sure if it's like a divided track list functionality. So if it's a divided track list, if we have events here, so let's say as I scroll, I like my tempo and time signature tracks will kind of stay at the top here as I scroll down. So, but if you wanted to move a track, you could just physically move the track up there. So if you always want the guitar track or to move it down. So let me know if that's what you mean by the top fixed display. And just let me know if that's what you intended to ask. All right. All right, so we see Guitar Play Along says, hey, everybody, I really dig these live streams. Thanks, Greg. All right. All right, so Patrick's just saying, thank you, Greg. As I requested previous live stream, we need brief video, you explaining all about Cubase's logical editor is much demanded, eagerly waiting. So, yeah, let me know if there's any particular things you want to do in a logical editor. I think that those are always really good to have. Like, I was stuck in this particular situation, and the logical editor was able to help me out with that. So. All right, so we have a question. Is there a quick way to delete all plugins in the mixer that cannot be loaded because they are not installed on the current machine? Let me just see if there's... I think sometimes it will keep them in case you go back to the machine originally, like if you were sharing projects and between two people and they had different plugin sets that that they wouldn't automatically get deleted if they were opened up. But let me just see if there's a way in the project logical editor. I don't think there is, but let me just check. So let's say media type is equal to effect and property is set to is disabled. All right, let's see. You say I may have a project. Let's see if I go here. I may have some plugins that are referenced that I don't own. me see if I have some plugins in that situation in another, maybe in here. All right, let me see if I can open up maybe an earlier version of a project that might have. Okay, so let's say I have a reference to UAD plate. Yeah, I don't have a scenario for that, but let me just see if I have. All right, so let's see if we go to Project Logical Editor. I don't think this may work. So let's see if it's disabled, if we could delete. Yeah, so I think it's like if you don't have the plugins and you want to pass the project back to someone who does, that those will be maintained, but it's not going to just play the particular it's not going to play the particular plugin for you. So all right, great to see Mark Winslow from Honolulu or Hawaii. I believe it's Honolulu or Oahu. All right, we see a nice comment from Cubase Junkie. Says, man, I really appreciate Greg and Dom know Cubase so well. So All right, so we have a question from Jazzy Lamel. It says, "Hey Greg, sorry for this crazy question. I just want to know: is it possible to get the audio engine in Cubase 12 to sound like Cubase 5, or is it even possible to manipulate the audio engine?" So the only way to really do to manipulate the audio engine in Cubase is if you go to the studio setup. I don't think I think if you played it back like with the same exact conditions that you wouldn't notice any difference. But in Cubase, I think it was 10.5. When we go to the audio system, you could switch this to 64-bit float. I think it will default to 32-bit float. So as you work with that, right, that's going to be like really the only significant difference. Other changes in the audio engines from 5 to 12 is going to be, incorporating ASIO guard that shouldn't affect the sound quality at all. And obviously the plugins have changed probably from Cubase 5 to now. But I think that the audio engine would primarily like 98% be the same. It wasn't like we just, flip this switch and, buy version 8 because it has new audio engine, something like that. So. All right, so we just see, maybe this is further clarification. It says, when picking the track, I assume track from the fixed track, maybe FX track, won't give a round circle, like red with a line through it. Okay, so let me just see if we come over here to, let's say, I think it's maybe instead of a fixed track, maybe an effects track. Sorry, I added the wrong type of track. Okay, so let's add effects track. So okay, so it says when picking a track from the effects track, it won't get a round circle. So let's say, if I have a revelation here. So I'm afraid I still don't understand. I'm sorry, but okay. All right, so I just see from Benny just about the issue with our Apaches, just that doesn't have notes starting at the very beginning has been logged in as a bug, so I passed it along as well. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. Okay, so we see just a clarification from Jeweler the Rocket. Just says, when I use a mono in, it records any sound in a project with the vocals. I've been using stereo in left side. It works properly. Is there any way to fix? I'm using Apollo Twin and no mixer. So, it seems, it should be kind of the same connections unless there's something else that's feeding that. So, out of curiosity, if you just have, no other sources in, I mean, Cubase is seeing it the same way, but it's, maybe something in the Apollo that's internally routed. So, but if I record a mono in source, so let's say, I'll just create a scenario here just to show. I don't really have just grab a instrument here quickly. See if I could do this easily. Okay, hang on just a second and grab an instrument. All right, so let's say I'm going to create my connections here. And I'm going to just start with one stereo input. And then I'm going to add a mono input. So let's add an audio track. Okay, so let's say I want my mono input. And I'll just put this into direct monitoring very quickly. All right, so let's say if I just play in. So now I'll just record straight in. So this is a mono input. All right, now I'm going to change the input here from the mono input to stereo in. And then record. So now we play back. So both of them are kind of passing the audio as expected. So if I just wanted to come in, let's just check my connections here one more time. So yeah, I mean, everything is kind of functioning as expected on my end here, but let me know if you're doing something different. So it's not capturing anything else. So I think it's going to be some routing maybe in the Apollo interface that's causing that. All right, so we just see question, will Cubase ever offer any DSP processing in their plugins or third-party plugins? I'm not sure what you mean by DSP processing in their plugins, or like when we have a a setup here, like if we're in direct monitoring, we could have the hardware have built-in, access the built-in DSP plugins on the audio interfaces, or if you're looking for, so when you say DSP processing under plugins or third-party plugins, I think even companies that are still selling, like DSP-based solutions or, selling native solutions because maybe the DSP really tends to be more of a copy protection mechanism. So I'm not sure if you want to have the Steinberg plugins running off of DSP. What tends to happen is, those DSP chips can come and go, and then your solution isn't working, but your processor will still be working. And we see, as Jazz Dude mentioned, just GPU VST plugins are kind of in open beta testing at gpu.audio. Okay, so you see he just has the other track on top of it is when he runs into problems with recording. So I'll just add a quick instrument track. So let's add a groove agent. All right, so now I'll play a groove agent pattern. Okay, so, and we'll set this to my mono input. All right. All right, and let's go ahead and now, so we'll go ahead and just play just the, so we'll take this. Let's go just all the bass. And I'll switch the input to, let's say, stereo in. All right, and let's listen to that. Didn't have the track arm for record, so. All right, we'll take this out of record and unmute it. And if we wanted to solo those tracks, no other tracks bleeding through. So seems like that's kind of working as expected for me. All right, so you just see, check how we're doing on time. We've got a couple minutes. All right, it says, sorry for the audio tracks are in the top fixed display. Try to move them down to the main display. All right, so let's say I create a divided track list and I move a track here. And then if I move it down, so if that's what you're trying to do, it seems, let me know if I'm doing it differently than you, but just kind of selecting the events, they're selecting the track and maybe not the event selected, but just the track and dragging the track up and down. See, Joel Doraka says, that's weird, it works fine for you. So I think it's going to be just kind of maybe a routing issue. Yeah, and I just see when I have a beat and record vocals in mono, it records the beat into my vocal track. So Yeah, just probably, check your mixer if you have like a little mixer applet for your Apollo, and just make sure it's not being sent, or it's not being sent into like a group track or something. All right. Let's see if there's any more questions. If not, we'll wrap up. We have just another minute or so. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. I know there's usually about a 20-second delay from when I speak to when it's out on the live stream. All right, we'll wait just a little longer. See if there's another quick question comes in. We see Best Green Jesus says, create a ticket to Steinberg support. Hope it gets fixed. So yeah, I think it's going to be really just like a routing issue in the Apollo that's causing it, or some kind. So we see from Jazzy Lamel, hey Greg, will there be any Black Friday sales coming up? So there's anytime that there's kind of big promotion times, there'll be some. I'm sure there'll be some Black Fridays and promotions. We're in the middle of a Nuendo promotion for 50% off. We just had a Cubase promotion for 40% off. So I don't think that there'll be anything as significant on that as Cubase and Nuendo, because they've just been on sale recently on promotion. But we have a broad portfolio of products. Okay, so I guess with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. We'll be doing this again on Friday starting at 1 p.m. And if I have my Zoom license sorted out from the office, we'll have our end of month Zoom meetup. Otherwise, we'll just push it back like a week or so. So thanks to everyone for all the great questions, and we'll see everyone on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Take care.